Hello, good evening and welcome to From the Be-All End. If last week was the live show nobody bothered to ask for, this week even less people asked for it, but we thought we'd do it again anyway. Slightly depleted squad, late fitness test, failed for Justin Connolly, but here with the rest of the pod squad, Simon Evans, Paul Woodhouse and Chris Borden. A busy week at Turf Moor on a number of different fronts, so we're going to spend a bit of time over the next half hour, 40 minutes or so, giving you the rundown of exactly what's happening. It's mainly outgoings, I have to say, but a couple of very exciting developments. And let's start with those exciting developments. Burnley FC, scratch that, ALK have signed an exciting development deal with Dundee FC in Scotland. It's the partnership we've all been waiting for. Think of all the great partnerships in history. Toval and Dean, Cannon and Ball. I can't think of any others.
Burnley. Why did that come to mind? Cannon and Ball. What could possibly have prompted that?
I cannot think why. But no, in all seriousness, ALK have signed a development deal where apparently we're going to share tips on how to cut the grass, how to get the ticketing right, things like that. I just hope Dundee FC are a hell of a lot more competent at ticketing than we seem to be. But Simon, you almost broke the internet with some of your AI-inspired imagery on the From the Be-All End Twitter account. This is an exciting deal, isn't it? We're told it's an exciting deal, so I'm guessing it must be an exciting deal.
I'm thrilled. No, it's one of those really where in my day job I get these kind of things passing me desk all the time. Football federations sign what they call memorandums of understanding with other football federations, where they say we're going to cooperate on player development and all this kind of stuff. Honestly, every week I see one from somewhere. Whatever, Peru with some African federation or whatever. This stuff goes on all the time. And people sort of put this in the same category as the multi-club sort of thing that Manchester City have done and that Red Bull have done to great effect. It isn't that yet. It isn't that because they haven't bought a stake in the club. Now, there are some suggestions that Dundee United's ownership group, which is also an American equity firm or private investment firm, are looking for investment or looking for somebody to maybe purchase the club. I don't think that's actually possible for them at the moment, given the rules with the Premier League and the FA and UEFA and all the rest of it. But if that is the goal, then that is something serious to discuss. At the moment, if this is just really about us saying, yeah, we're going to loan you, we're going to give you first option on loans of players, or we're going to move them along, it's really not that big a deal. But I'm also not agitated by it. We all like to have a good whinge. I'm also not really going to whinge about it either, because it's not a big deal, I don't think. And we've seen so many of these things come along, even at Burnley, with Ayr United and other clubs and so on, that nothing's ever come of them. So if 2 or 3 Burnley players are on loan at Dundee, I mean, I'm not excited, but I'm not also going into like, oh my God, what are ALK up to now mode either.
Yeah, I think we were joking at the start, but I think it is a bit of perspective, isn't it? I mean, I thought it was very telling that you could only name Ayr United, I have to say, Simon, but there we go. But we have had so many. Corb Rangers, and who was the
Corb Ramblers.
Corb Ramblers, sorry.
And Landudno FC, was it?
That's where Roy Keane started, isn't it?
Landudno.
It is, yeah. It is, definitely. Woody, I mean, Simon's not going to whinge, but we know you love a whinge. Well, are you going to take the floor and cut this deal apart?
I think he was just scouting locations to marry off 2 more of his daughters at the moment, temples up yonder for mission to Dundee, And that's pretty much all I've got to say on it.
Excellent. So that we're just less than 6 minutes in and need to get the legal department involved. Fantastic.
Welcome.
It's only a couple of hours
Allegedly.
away by train, according to Alan Pace's interview with BBC Lancashire.
Yeah, couple of hours by train. I mean, I don't know what train
I had a
he's
quick
getting
look.
on.
I had a quick look on the train timetable. Yeah, and you're doing well if you can do it under 5.5. Yeah.
Excellent. Chris, I mean, you've been around some of these, you've reported on some of these deals in the past. I mean, you brought up Carolina Railhawks. I just about remember the kind of, fanfare around that didn't really come to anything. But Simon's right. I mean, if it is somewhere in the Scottish Premiership, which is, a level where they could end up playing European football, if it's a case of getting some young lads out like Dara Costello and Owen Dodgson, who've both gone up there, there's nothing wrong with it, is there? I mean, it might seem a bit of PR fluff, but essentially, if we're getting somewhere where we can regularly send players who are going to get first team football, we can't really be too critical of something like that, can we?
Well, no, but it's hardly an exciting announcement. I mean, you can do that anyway. You don't have to go into partnership with clubs. I mean, say J-Rod went up to Scotland and made his debut in the cup at Parkhead against Celtic, and didn't have the greatest of times up there. A bit further south, and you think of Kyle Lafferty going to Darlington and prospering there, etc. You don't need a link up, but I mean, it does Dara Costello and Owen Dodgson no harm whatsoever. And I think there were a few, just reading some comments over there were a few Rangers fans mocking Dundee, and Dundee was sort of reeling off a list of players that Rangers had taken off their hands over the years, including Claudio Canigia at one stage. But we took Kevin MacDonald obviously from them in 2009, and he's proved a very good talent. I don't know if they've created anything like as good a talent ever since, but it's one of those, isn't it? It's like what they get out of the relationship with Carolina Railhawks, a couple of friendlies. Mm-hmm. What have they got out of this relationship with Llandudno and Ayr and Portadown and Cobh? A few friendlies behind closed doors, a couple of youth tournaments. It just
we're brilliant behind closed doors, though, aren't we? To be fair.
Oh yeah, we are. To be fair,
we will
just
come
washes
on
over me. Well, yeah, washes over me.
We will come on to our prowess in behind closed doors friendlies in a second. But I mean, in the summer, Simon, we were talking about ALK and Alan Pace wanting to perhaps buy a team. They were looking at one of the teams, Kortrijk, I think it was, over in Belgium. Which Vincent Tan is the owner of, or was the owner of. And we were kind of a little bit critical in that case in terms of, look, get your house in order over here financially before you start buying another club. You mentioned at the start about the relationship and the fact that the Texan-based financier who owns Dundee, Mr. Keys, was perhaps looking for somebody to get a stake in it. It does seem increasingly the model, doesn't it? I think, did I see somewhere that Bournemouth were looking at a link up with Hibs or something like that? It does look like teams are trying to get this multi-club model, but very few of them really ever make a success of it, do they? I mean, you mentioned the City Football Group and Red Bull. Everything else is just Brighton, maybe with their kind of links that they had over in Belgium. But it is just PR fluff, isn't it, essentially? It's just, one club obviously gets a bit more expertise from one side and the other club gets a little bit of player loans and things like that. It is mainly PR fluff, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Well, there's always the assumption that there's some great gains to be got through the synergies of sharing staff and expertise. They'll always say that in these agreements. And no doubt, there is an element to that. There's no reason why smaller clubs, and I know people in Scotland won't like that, but I mean, these deals are between Premier League clubs and smaller clubs generally. So there's no doubt that smaller clubs can gain by having an association with a Premier League club. I'm not sure at the moment there's a lot to be gained by an association with Burnley at the moment. But, in theory, if we take a club that we probably know better, right? We think about Accrington Stanley. If we had like a proper arrangement like that with Accrington Stanley, you could see how, you know, they might take advantage of the facilities, the coaching staff, the academy, swapping academy players from different age groups to come and try out. There are things you can see, best practices across sort of technology and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, the multi-club model as a whole, I don't like really. And I think increasingly people are starting to see it as a part of modern football that could undermine some quite important values in the game, I think. I mean, I look at the club that I supported in Hungary when I lived in Hungary in my 20s, and Újpest, they've been owned by the same Belgian company that owned Charlton Athletic for a long time, and also owned another club somewhere else, I think in Belgium. Really distant owners, been no real benefits from that arrangement whatsoever, other than the feeling that the club had lost its identity and had become a sort of feeder club from somebody else. It didn't really actually feed anyone, but there was that feeling of, is that what we're here for now? You know, we used to be in the semi-final of the UEFA Cup or the Cup Winners' Cup, and now we're a feeder club for a Belgian team, you know, or Charlton Athletic. It's not really the romance of football, is it, to be owned by another club, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point, isn't it, Woody? I mean, we've talked a lot about, you know, what attracted us to Burnley. And when we went through our teams, you know, we could rattle off, you know, players who we grew up watching in all four divisions. I think we all probably had players from all four divisions. And, you know, that is the romance of football, isn't it? That kind of a football club rooted in its community. You know, the other one, of course, is the Everton 777 partners who own God knows how many clubs. I've lost count of how many clubs they own. But, you know, each one kind of starts to dilute the kind of involvement of, you know, that ownership group with another. And we are, you know, we take the mickey out of Alan Pace, of course, and, you know, we'll continue to be robustly critical of ALK. But, you know, there is a certain degree of, you know, Alan Pace has, and a lot of all the ALK partners have, by and large, uprooted their families from the US and moved to the area. There does feel to be some, you know, some affiliation with the area, and that is, you know, either, you know, manufactured or otherwise. But, you know, when you start seeing these, you know, multi-club partnerships where there's, you know, dozens and dozens of clubs involved in a big web, Simon's right. It does take away from that, you know, value of what is a community asset, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of flips it from, like you say, that community grassroots element, which is what obviously football in the UK and invariably Europe is about, like I've spoken before. And it suddenly becomes more top down. I mean, how concentrated does it get? How sprawling are these little groups? You know, and do they get quite, you know, and is it just then a case of like 6 various groups and everybody else, you know, rolls up to those? And we don't want to see that. You'd hate that from a Burnley perspective, having to be a feeder club to the likes of City, etc. And so it can't be much fun for the likes of Dundee, you know, when they think that their halcyon days were at least 50 odd years ago, and it's just another sorry rusty nail in their coffin as they have to take, you know, second string players from Burnley who come on second half for them and invariably probably don't do anything.
But what happens if, like, we're in the bottom half of the Championship and Dundee are in the Europa League and ALK own both clubs? Where's their priority then? I mean, is it totally out of the question, as ridiculous as it seems now, is it totally out of the question that in a situation like that, ALK go, you know what, if we can get in Champions League, the revenue from that is loads better. And why are we pumping all this money into a Championship club when we could be in Champions League? We might become the smaller club at some stage.
With, I'm guessing, much smaller cost burden in Scottish Premiership, in terms of, you know, their wage bill, their operating costs would be a hell of a lot lower. Now, we're not suggesting for a second that is what ALK are thinking, but this is what it brings into, isn't it? You know, there's that, and there's also, somebody has mentioned MKP Fave has said all the powers that be looking to Watford multi-club transfers. You know, Watford are the kind of the example I always think of in terms of some of the players that have gone for silly money between the clubs. And, you know, I think one player went from Watford to Udinese for, a fairly handsome fee and was then loaned back to Watford. I mean, that's clearly an attempt to get around FFP, isn't it? And financial fair play.
You're talking. I mean, they've had some pretty elite players out of that arrangement, back and forth. As you say, it's not loaning a under 23 player to someone for a month or two, is it? Matty Vizra was one of the Udinese players. I think Alexis Sanchez was at Udinese and obviously didn't go the Watford route. But you look at the players that Udinese have had, over time, and it's.
Is Grenada part of that arrangement as well? Are they part? Is it?
I think so. But you talk about. I mean, what City? What City have? I mean, City have. I mean, did they technically own Aaron Moy when he went to Huddersfield from Melbourne? And they've had like Jack Harrison was at New York City, but they've not. It hasn't created a conveyor belt of talent that City have snapped up for their side either. So that's where I look at it. It's purely first team level. Is it? If that sort of relationship's in play, are we going to get assets for the first team? And the partner, are they going to get assets for their first team? And if not, to me, I see absolutely no relevance in it whatsoever.
What kind of sarcastic person could send a message like this? I'm just looking forward to the JJ Watt Dundee baseball caps and the new Font D baseball cap that little Alan, whoever that is, will be modelling soon. Crazy.
There's a very cynical fork out there, GST. Very cynical fork out there. I can just imagine that, though. That's an interesting comment. Casey James, football is dead and now our beloved club is the same as all the ones ruin the game, losing interest with it all. I'm not sure we've got to that stage yet. I think, I still think the fan base around Burnley, I don't think would let it slip away in quite the same way as we've, perhaps allowed other clubs, not mentioning any names, Newcastle United have kind of, almost gone back on their beliefs when the money rolls in. Let's move on. Let's move on to a Premier League win, a very rare Premier League win that we got this week. It's just a shame it doesn't actually count towards the Premier League, and none of us could actually see it. But Burnley beat Man United 3-1 in a behind closed doors friendly, which Eric Ten Hag had set up for some of his returning players. There's a sense of deja vu here, isn't there? Because I think we beat United 3-0 at a similar stage last season. Is this a renaissance? Is this the signs that the hours on the training field are suddenly playing off, or is it just the fact that United are still pretty shite and were pretty shite before the winter break and are still pretty shite now? Simon,
the Great Escape starts here, doesn't it? This is it. Yeah, I mean, look at our results after that 3-0 win at Carrington last year. We were on fire and went and got promoted. It means absolutely nothing whatsoever, this game. Absolutely nothing. We don't even know who played in it. We don't know if it was 2 halves of 45 minutes or 3 quarters of 30 minutes or whatever. You can't have that, can you? But it was we don't. It's a training exercise. Training exercise. I mean, we can laugh about it, and it's better than losing it, I suppose. But it really doesn't mean anything, does it?
No, absolutely not. Would it? Talking of the Great Escape, of course, we've got an easy game coming up next, not far from United's training ground down at the Etihad. Justin keeps saying, and we can kind of slag him off because he's not here today, but Justin keeps saying we'll get more points in the second half than we did in the first half. You're not expecting too much from next Wednesday's game, are you?
No. And Justin's always drunk. That's the other thing we've got to take into consideration that we don't, we're going to see one surprise at some point. We always do, but I don't think it's happening next week at Main Road. So I mean, of course, it's dependent on who's fit and who isn't. Haaland's almost on his way back, isn't he? So he'll probably just ease his way into that with a nice little first half hat trick, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, all the talk was that Haaland is nearly ready, but not quite. I mean, he's absolutely nailed on to be in a City shirt at 7:30, isn't he, on Wednesday evening?
Well, if he's nearly ready for Spurs on Friday night, yeah, you're assuming he's very much ready for Burnley on next Wednesday, and he just fills you with dread, doesn't he? He's just a monster, just unplayable. You know, he ragdolled that defence in the cup game last season, and just a display of magnificent finishing. You know, granted, space and time that he had as well, but at Turf on the opening day. But yeah, I'm speaking to someone the other day. He said, "Oh, I mean, City don't seem to be smashing sides this season," and well, I'm afraid they do. They put five
Wait
past
till next Wednesday. Yeah,
5 past Huddersfield in the cup. They 4 in the FIFA World Cup final against Fluminense, and 6 past Bournemouth, 5 past Fulham. They're scoring goals for fun, and it's one of those. It doesn't matter whether Haaland's fit or not, because they'll just play Alvarez and whichever of those little 3 magicians that they play in midfield, or whether Stones is fit, doesn't matter. Rico Lewis can play, and Akanji can fit in, and Ake can play, and it's just a galaxy beyond, and anything less than a 3-0 defeat is a moral victory.
Moral victory, Simon. I mean, Chris was rattling off some names there. I mean, we kind of worry about who's going to play left back when Charlie Taylor's not available, don't we? I mean, that's, it's almost unfair, isn't it? It's an unfair advantage that they can be without Haaland but still have Alvarez, and we're struggling to see who we're going to fit into a midfield without Berger. And he's got himself on mute again.
Yeah, it's funny, I was talking to somebody yesterday about City and how much we've enjoyed watching them over the years from a sort of neutral's point of view, but also that I've got a bit of a feeling of people starting to get a little bit bored with the Premier League, and I do think that the fact that City just keep on winning, and even this year Liverpool get ahead of them, and you sort of think, yeah, but City are going to win 8 in a row at some stage and go and win it. And it's got to that stage now. I think, 3 or 4 years of City dominating was all right. This is a brilliant team. We've seen this before with United. We've seen it with Liverpool in the 70s and so on. Now it's starting to feel like it's City's competition. They'll turn it on and off as they wish. They'll get a few injuries that might, deflect them on their route to winning it. But I do feel now that they're like killing the competition a little bit. We're not in that competition, obviously, but just generally, the fact that you have a team like Spurs coming along who look a pretty decent side, Postecoglou's building a nice side. They're good to watch. The fans are behind them, and you think, but are they ever going to win the league? Are they really?
Well, was it Chris Sutton? You see that Chris Sutton comment this week saying, Harry Kane's going to be jealous of Tottenham, the way they're playing, and he's not going to win the league at Bayern, and he should come back. And you're thinking, are you on drugs?
Maybe finish 4th.
Exactly.
Yeah, but ultimately, any Aluko's the problem, isn't it? You know what I mean. In terms of that's the case in point, isn't it? Chris Sutton, Premier League winner, talks absolute nonsense.
I watched Bayern last night, and they ain't winning the German league, and they ain't winning the Champions League, and I see nobody stopping Manchester City again other than themselves.
Yeah. But it is, Bayern's an interesting one, and what's happening in Germany with, Nathan Teller powered by Leverkusen, it is interesting because in Germany, you think about the clubs, a club like Borussia Dortmund are so up and down, aren't they? I remember kind of Klopp, I think after they won the league, the season after they were really struggling, and Klopp left because they were, down towards the relegation zone and things like that. So leagues can stay competitive, can't they? I mean, the Italian league, Napoli winning their third title last year, but their first for however long it was. It is something weirdly inbuilt into the Premier League that we do go through these spells, don't we, where a team will get ahead and then just nobody can touch them. Start of the season, Woody, Spurs looked decent. They were brilliant against us. But there's always that they lost Maddison. They've lost Son now to the Asia Cup. If either City don't seem to be prone to losing players and it affecting them, or there's an imbalance, isn't there, in the English league, perhaps compared to, the Italian, the German league. I know the French and Spanish leagues are a little bit more kind of sawn off, if you will.
Yeah, when you can kind of concentrate, obviously, once you have all this money that comes in, you can basically just throw X amount of cash at a particular club, such as Newcastle, such as Man City. These are clubs, yes, with history, but haven't necessarily dominated until they had money thrown at them, and it's that total imbalance. It's that total imbalance. And we know there'll be a slight asterisk against this particular City side at some point, but it's the likes of your Tottenhams, even they've got to have an absolutely startling, staggering start. They've got to make sure they keep everybody fit, whereas the likes of your Cities can have a little bit of a blip, lose 2 or 3 key players, have folks still come in, and they're still there and thereabouts to make that push. And we see it year after year. And so it's not necessarily a level playing field in that regards. And it's disappointing.
Yeah, definitely. I should mention, of course, Girona are currently sat pretty at the top of La Liga, a point ahead of Real Madrid, who I think we've got a game in hand. But the point is, Simon, that you obviously watch from afar. You've seen the development of MLS and things, and we've not got relegation in American sports, of course. But I can't believe I'm saying this. Is the Super League an option to level the playing field for teams like? Probably level the playing field for teams like Spurs and below, because there is this feeling that in some of the top divisions there's no room at the table for anybody who, isn't multi-million, billion rich, etc.
I don't know. It would have been interesting if the Super League breakaway had have happened, and they were hoping to sort of have the cake and eat it and stay in the Premier League, weren't they? But let's say they got expelled and we didn't have the big 6 in the Premier League. And Germany didn't have Bayern and Dortmund or whatever. What those domestic leagues would be like? Would they have come to life with like this competition, or would they have felt that they'd been left without their star attractions? I suspect the sort of global audience that there is for the Premier League would have fallen off pretty significantly if those big clubs weren't there. So that would have gone. But in terms of the rest of us and the domestic sort of scene, if you had a season then where you had like Spurs and West Ham and Wolves battling for the title, would it be more interesting? Probably, yeah, it probably would, But over time, would you then feel there's something missing? I think so, yeah. So it's kind of, we don't want them, but we don't want to be without them either, really, don't we? It's one of those, really. I just think, I don't know. I think it's really tricky to deal with any of this. The way the money that's come into the game. FFP. You start seeing things happening now, like Newcastle apparently having to get rid of maybe Trippier or Almiron in order to, balance the books for FFP. And you think, yeah, those articles that Martin Samuel wrote in the Times saying that FFP is anti-competitive and stops clubs coming along to challenge the likes of City and Liverpool. Maybe he has a point, because, Newcastle are building something quite interesting and quite good that could become a challenge to those teams at the top, regardless of what we think of the morality of where the money's coming from and everything. But the FFP stopping them going out and signing more and more players and becoming part of that big elite. So then again, if we don't have any financial fair play stuff, it's just going to be, the richest team wins all the time. So I don't know.
40 million been spent in this Premier League transfer window so far, with a week to go. And I think, was there something like 800 million this time last year when Chelsea signed anyone who had any ability to kick a ball whatsoever. Well, that's the damning thing, isn't it? That Chelsea have spent what seems like an absolute bucket load on players and got them all on 8-year deals before this was made against the rules, and spread out their payments, etc. And they could get round it, and then Newcastle all of a sudden are, looking like they're not going to qualify for the Champions League again. So then, you lose your Guimaraes's and Joelinton wants more money than they can afford, etc. And all of a sudden, they're breaking the team up. And I say Trips. How on earth can Trips turn down Bayern Munich at 33? He can't. And from watching them last night, it'd be exactly what they're crying out for and what Harry Kane's crying out for.
Yeah.
If they think he's scoring a lot of goals now, wait till Trips is providing a supply line for
You know who's crying out for Trips?
Sean Dyche.
Lyle Foster.
Can you imagine that? Lyle Foster getting on the end of some of those deep crosses from deep from Trips, where he used to stick it in from only like 10, 20 yards over the halfway line, them lovely looping balls behind the defence. Oh gosh, what we wouldn't give.
That one that Ingsy took down against, was it Forest?
Yes.
Killed it stone dead. And it just, like Sean Dyche said, you don't stop him, anywhere on the park doing that, do you? Just, we've not seen anyone like that in this country since Beckham.
No, definitely not. Let's move on to transfers. It seems a natural place to kind of move on to transfers. A couple of outgoings this week. Michael Obafemi joining Millwall. Obviously, the mass exodus up to Dundee, which we talked about. Darko Cherlinov rejoining Schalke in the German second tier. It feels a bit weird, doesn't it? I don't want to say it's feeling like the room's getting empty, because we've still got plenty of players, but kind of Michael Obafemi's been in and around the first team squad. We've had obviously nothing from Darko, but it feels like some of the players that were signed are now being deemed surplus to requirements. It's not great, is it, in terms of looking at what we've got? Someone's mentioned there 4 million Twine, 3 million Obafemi, 2.5 million on Cherlinov. That's 9.5 million spent and nowhere near the squad. We might be rewriting history by kind of reassessing the transfer dealings from last season. But Simon, you kind of probably expect that these clearances are happening so that there's room in the squad to bring players in. Perhaps the worry for Burnley fans is we're not being linked with half as many players coming in as we are players going out, are we?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there are players coming in, or whether this is an attempt to sort of deal with the wage bill, because they've signed a lot of players, haven't they? I mean, I counted it out last weekend that they in the company era we've signed 35 players. He's not been here that long, has he? And that squad, a lot of them, we've got players going out now on loan who were brought in as exciting new signings not too long ago. The start of the championship season, so. It's, Obafemi, you look at it, and I couldn't really tell you what kind of player he is, really. I mean, we've seen bits and glimpses here and there, but it sort of feels like I've got more of a memory of Narky Wells playing for Burnley than I have of, like, Michael Obafemi.
It's not that bad.
Come on.
No, but I'm not saying he's that level of player, but we haven't seen much of him, have we, really? No. And it doesn't feel like a sort of loan deal where it's like, go and prove yourself at Millwall. It feels a bit like a sort of out the door one to me. I mean, it might not be, but
yeah.
When we see your likes again,
Yeah, I mean, I quite like the cameos he used to make last season, when clearly because he'd not played a lot for Swansea before he signed, because they were I think Russell Martin was the boss then, weren't he? Kind of, he knew he wanted out and wasn't really playing him. But Woody, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, Cherlinov is the big disappointment, because he came with quite a good reputation. I think he just got Schalke promoted when helped them to promotion. And actually, when we saw him, he looked to offer something slightly different to Zaroury and Benson, who, of course, were our two first choice wingers, and we'll come on to in a second. But there's a few of these players who you just think I just wonder if, given a chance, we might have got a tune out of them and not been in the quandary which we might find ourselves in certain areas.
I think that's fair. They almost seem like victims of competition for places, don't they? And then you had with Cherlinov, he obviously had that illness this past summer, etc. And he always seemed to be trying a little bit too hard when he came on, and that he had to prove too much, that he was trying to do too much. And in a different Burnley era under Dyche, arguably, he may have seen, more minutes and been able to develop a little bit more. And it just seems to be that you have to take those chances under VK, and otherwise you're not necessarily out in the cold, but you might not figure as much as you'd want to. And it's just a shame. We don't know much about Chelenoff, really. We don't know so much about Obafemi, and they just get pushed along. We may not see him again anywhere near Turf Moor.
Yeah, and Chris, I'd say it's pretty much nailed on that we won't see Chelenoff again. I mean, we barely saw kind of hide the hair of him when he wasn't ill, and thankfully he's now over that illness. But you kind of half get the impression that both of these players will go out and do a decent job for the clubs they're going out to. We've spoke before about the culture within this team of being, look, when you get a chance, you've got to take it. Someone like Trezor is kind of just being thrown scraps with the odd start here and there. It's a bit of a weird position to be in as a footballer, isn't it? Being a squad player in a huge squad in a big league and basically being told you've got a 10-minute sub appearance, knowing that actually if you don't make an impression, you'll be out of the match day squad for the next 2 or 3 games.
Oh, I'm just looking at one of the comments again. GST feels like a failed transfer policy stroke scattergun approach. It feels more and more like a scattergun approach. In hindsight, you go back 18 months, Scott Twine through the door. Yeah, he had an injury, but didn't really get much of a look in. Egan Riley never had a kick. McNally never had a kick. Bastian, bits and pieces. Muric, played all season, then shown the cold shoulder. You basically Cullen, who again, has pretty much been out of the side for 2 months, bar Berger's absence, through illness and suspension, and Vitinho, who I think probably people thought was Burnley's second choice right back going into the season after Connor Roberts' performances last season. It's like the summer business from 2002. Yeah, it's culminating in Burnley winning the championship, but it's that business has almost entirely gone to the wall now. It's and like you say, you've got players now who are. Trezor is obviously a talent. I think he's a luxury player, it's been hard for him to get any sort of rhythm and momentum without a run of games. You see what Koleosho got a run of games, Odebert's getting a run of games, and you see what he can deliver in that sense. But it's like Obafemi, he wasn't a player signed in January last year. Think, we're going to the Premier League. He's a lad that Vincent wanted the summer before. He seemed to me the perfect type. Physical, strong, good touch, can turn, pace, aggressive, and we just haven't seen him, have we? Obviously, another with an injury on international duty that ruled him out at the start of the season, and it's just again, I feel that's a great shame. But you bring Fofana in and then lose Obafemi. All it takes is an injury, a suspension again, and we're light again in that area. But and still no sign of a left back.
Left back. I did get it. Sorry, did mention about the left back being the problem area. And I do get it. There's probably more right backs than left backs just due to kind of the number of right footers and left footers, and I've not got any scientific evidence for that. But just looking, Simon. The latest rumor today is that Birmingham City are interested in a loan deal for Manuel Benson. I think we were kind of almost reaching for the whiskey and the tablets last summer when we thought we might lose Manuel Benson, and Sasha, friend of the podcast, came on and said, no, don't worry, he's not going AC Milan. We had an exclusive from Sasha. If he pitches up at Birmingham City, that is the indignity of pitching up at Birmingham City after being linked with AC Milan. It is weird, isn't it? It is very, very weird what's happened with him and Zarori. Do you expect to see one or both of them out the door before the transfer window, to quote Jim White, slam shut? Because it never shuts quietly, does it?
It would be bizarre after all this speculation about Benson if he's in our starting lineup in February, wouldn't it? It would be bizarre. He's been linked with Leeds United, Birmingham City,
Southampton,
Hull City.
Hull City.
You know, I mean, half the championship's been linked with Manuel Benson. You know, I mean, what can you say? I'd like to see him play for Burnley. I'd like to see him have been given a chance this season. I wanted to see how he'd do in the Premier League. But, you know, for whatever reason, Vincent either doesn't think he's up to it or he's not been fit enough. We don't really know how much of the time he's not been picked and how much he's been injured either, do we? You know, which is, you know, I mean, in the days when Chris Bowden was at the Burnley Express, that question would have been asked, wouldn't it? You know?
Well, it still is. To be fair to the lads, it still is being.
But not being answered.
I think they get short shrift.
Yeah.
I mean, we all used to laugh and joke with Sean, and he's on the grass. So you were either smoking pot or you were a good couple of weeks away from full fitness, and they had to be diet fit, etc. And but no, there's like a reticence to speak about injuries, and you can understand like you don't want to give opponents a leg up, but it's just nice. The fans are crying out for information, and it's they're in the dark.
Yeah. So no, it'd be a shame if Benson goes, but it would be a surprise if he doesn't now, wouldn't it?
Now we've got a bit of a special treat for you, exclusive to the podcast, not on last night's live show. It's the first part of our two-part interview with Burnley legend Michael Duff. Chris and Simon sat down with Michael just after we'd finished recording last night's live show to discuss his time at Burnley, his time in management, and what he thinks of Vincent Kompany's team. Here's part one.
Michael Duff, thank you very much indeed for joining us today on From the BOL End. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm doing pretty good at the minute, so it's all good.
Excellent. So let's just start off with how you ended up arriving at Burnley in the first place. We're going back to the days when Steve Cotterill was the manager. You were at Cheltenham Town. How did that move come about, and what did you think of it at the time about a move to Burnley at that stage in your career?
Well, if I'm honest, I thought obviously the obvious connection was Cots. Cots brought me through non-league into the Football League, had me as a 17-year-old, and we had 3 or 4 promotions together. He actually tried to sign me for Stoke when he went to Stoke, but the club at the time wanted too much money. It fell through. And then when he went to Burnley, obviously there was a big transition at the time. I think it was the ITV Digital had just collapsed. So there was no money at the club, and I think they could get me for 30 grand. I think they got me for in the end. But at that point, I was 26, and I'd had people watching me from the age of 19. I was supposed to be going here, there, everywhere. And I ended up getting 350, 360 games for Cheltenham, thinking I've missed the boat. So I think I came... So I snapped his hand. I was on holiday with the now wife and some friends, and it was, "Do you want to come?" I was like, "Yeah." And I think I actually signed for £100 a week more than what I was on in League Two. But it was the opportunity. It wasn't anything to do with the money. It was like I've been promised this, a move to Stoke, and you go in there, going on trial to Liverpool, all these sorts of things, and they'd all fallen through. And when you get to 26, you think, "Well, I said I'm just a League One, League Two player now." So it was the opportunity as much as anything else. I was desperate to come. And the fact we only had eight players at the time helped. So it meant I played quite a lot in the first year when I probably shouldn't have done.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of players I've talked to from that era who were at Burnley will talk about the facilities not being as good as they'd hoped and so on, and getting changed in one place and jumping in a car and going and training somewhere else and so on. But going to Burnley from Cheltenham, what did it feel like a big step up for you going to Burnley at that stage?
It was huge. So I moved into the hotel with Frank Sinclair and John McGrail. So if you go back 20 odd years, like I said, Frank had just been at obviously Leicester and Chelsea, and John McGrail had been at Ipswich playing in Leicester. And there was little old me. I still speak to John McGrail now. I still say that he was the reason why I ended up making it at that level, because I learned so much from him in terms of just how to conduct yourself, how to be a good pro. because I was like a little kid walking around. I know everyone else was moaning about the facilities and things, but like I said, it was the opportunity. I thought it had all passed me by. So to have that opportunity, I was going to take it. So I was like a sponge. Like I said, it definitely wasn't for money or anything like that. It was I'd had quite an upward trajectory quite quickly. Then it sort of plateaued a little bit, and then I got a chance to make another jump, and it didn't bother me jumping in. My car was crap anyway, so we were jumping in dirt. I normally, they were all jumping in Mercs and BMWs, and I can't remember what I was driving at the time, Mitsubishi or something like that, I think it was. So it was, they were quite happy to jump in my banger.
Is it better than Barnsley's smart car?
Yeah, I think anything was better than that. But saying that, Wade Elliott's A3 was infamous as well. So he was a Premier League player driving around in a Y-Reg A3. But he was the tightest man in football. So,
but I mean, you'd already broken into the Northern Ireland squad, hadn't you, at Cheltenham? But was there any sort of pressure to play at the higher level, or were they sort of happy where you were really?
No, that's what I mean. I had a lot of people watching me. I'd managed to get international recognition in League Two, which is difficult. Now, Northern Ireland weren't in a great place, but it's still international football. Still playing with or training with Premier League players, and you sort of feel a bit of a spare part because you just feel like you're not good enough. And you fast forward a day and you're at a Championship club, and all of a sudden you feel a little bit more comfortable in your own skin because, well, I'm a Championship player now, even though you've not improved at all, because it's just the stigma attached to it. So that's what I mean about thinking I'd missed the boat. I thought it passed me by. So I was, as soon as Cots rang me, like I said, it wasn't a negotiation. It was like, yeah, I'm coming. When do you want me? Where do you want me? And I think we had 8 players at the time. I remember the Cots, because I used to be a good runner, believe it or not, pre-season. So Cots, I remember the first thing he said to me, just make sure you're at the front of all the running. So I think in the first 2 or 3 weeks, I think I won every race, just trying to put your marker down that, I belong here.
You remember going to Austria? I remember you sort of getting on the coach. That was the first year we'd ever been away with the first team, and him knocking on our doors at stupid o'clock in the morning, saying, "Get up, you're running with the lads." You're like, "Geez."
Yeah, I think that was for his benefit more than anything, to get his own working, because that was the first of normally 3 sessions a day. But no, it was good, Austria. But I really liked Austria. It was a bit out of the way, and it wasn't like all singing, all dancing like they all get now. It was a bit spit and sawdust sort of place, but it was good, and it brought the players together as well.
So sort of important. Sorry, I always remember watching Steve drilling the back four in particular. Is that sort of where you ironed everything out initially, and you worked ever so hard that week? I
think if you go back to those years, like I said, the size of the squad, the budget that we had or we didn't have, it was a case of just being organised and just trying to give yourself a chance to stay in the league. I think we were favourites for relegation the year I came. And that was, if you look at the teams that ended up being built from that team, the team that got promoted and things like that, it was based on sort of a solidity, an organisation sort of thing. And then obviously Coyle came in and sort of freed it up a little bit, but that structure was always there from Steve. And he'll tell you now that he evolved after that. He went to Bristol City and they played 3-5-2, got 100 points and played total expansive football. But at that time, it was, well, we're favourites for relegation. We've got no players. We've got untested players and young players, people like Chappie and people like that. So it was a case of, well, how do we survive? And it started with, a solid base. So, yeah, there was a lot of work put into the structure of the team.
Yeah, I was going to say that a lot of people now, when they look back on that time, even though there was that long stretch where results weren't happening and there was a lot of draws and so on, and people do look back on it now as being the sort of foundation for how Burnley became a Premier League club eventually. I mean, at that time, though, when you're doing it, did it just feel like battling for survival, or did you have the sense that this is something good is going to come from this, even if it's with eventually a different manager?
I don't think you think as a player, you don't think about the next manager or anything like that. You're just trying to, like I said, in the early years, I was just happy to be there. Not happy to be there, but happy to be there and not just making up the numbers, trying to compete and fight for my spot and prove myself. that's why I was there. Reflecting on it back now, I think there was only probably, I don't know, was it Pato and Chris Eagles maybe that started the Wembley game that weren't Steve signings? You'll know better than me. So it was almost like the structure was built by Steve, and then Coyley sort of released the shackles a little bit and let us play with a little bit more freedom, and they added a little bit of stardust in terms of Pato, and I don't know what they paid for Pato, £1 million or something. But then when we did lose the ball, it was that organisation was almost drilled into us that Coyley didn't even need to talk about that because it was already done. It already been preloaded. So I think it was a perfect storm, really, in terms of getting the sort of the solidity and the freedom that they brought, and obviously Coyley brought that out of us. Yeah,
we're looking forward to talking to him. We've been in touch with Owen, and he's promised us he'll come on and have a reflection on that time. But
that'll be a long show.
Yeah. In terms of different managers, and we're probably asking you this about everybody you work with, but was Steve a particular influence on you? Is he someone you've kept in touch with when you started your own management career?
Yeah, I think the two obvious influences of my career are Steve and Dyche. Steve, because he got older than me as a 17-year-old in non-league, managed to drag me through into the Football League, and then took me into the Championship. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I think I did okay for him. He managed to sign me for 30 grand. I played nearly 400 games for the club, and I was £100 a week more. But that at the early part of my career now, and then at this more, I still speak to Steve. He's still at Cheltenham every week. I'm in Cheltenham now. But more the managerial side of it, when I went to the side I'm in now, that was more Dyche, just because of the age I was at when I met him. He gave me brilliant access. I still speak to him regularly. I'm actually supposed to be going up to Everton in a couple of weeks just to see them all. So he's the one I sort of bounce things off a lot more in terms of not the way we want to play. I know how I want to play, but more the man management. He's been through situations that I'm, even situations I've just gone through now, and it's managing those sorts of things. So he's the one I lean on more on the manager side. But if it wasn't for Steve, I might not be sat here now. I was knocking around in non-league football, so I've got a hell of a lot to owe him.
Mm-hmm. Chris,
what was it about Steve, Michael? Obviously, he had that sort of that man management about him. I could see why players would want to go through a brick wall for him, sort of thing. Was that part of it? And obviously, his coaching prowess as well, where he organised.
I think he's just been appointed at a new job today, but I think he's got 900 games. I think the clubs. You look at the clubs that he's had. I think one thing he is definitely Steve. Some people like him, some people don't. But there's no doubt, and he can coach and he can pick a player. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The thing that he'll always tell you about me is that when he met me when I was 17, we used to play head tennis in the car park at Cheltenham. And it's a silly little thing, but they used to beat me all the time, but I used to come back every day. And he still talks about it now. He said, the thing I liked about you, I used to beat you, but you came back every single day until I got to a point where I used to beat him. And he still goes back to now that was the trait in me that you can keep knocking me down, I'm coming back, and I'll keep coming back until I win, because that's where I was dogged. So, yeah, quite a lot of half times he was in my face telling me how rubbish I was, but I reacted to, well, I'll prove you wrong, and that's the thing, and that's always been a trait in me, trying to prove people wrong constantly, whether you're good enough to play in the Championship, whether it's coming back from a knee injury, whether it's 37 playing in the Premier League, it's constantly trying to prove people that I am not as bad as what you think I am.
I saw a bit of that in Austria. He got me to do something I'd never have done in a million years. If you remember jumping off the diving board in the whitewater rafting, and he got in my head, because I think remember Daz was working for the Telegraph at the time. He wasn't with the club, and he just said Steve had said Daz he was game for that. He jumped off the springboard, and Steve said, "Are you going to let the fucking Telegraph beat you?" And I was like, "No, I'm not actually. No." Went up there, and I'd never have done it. Wouldn't have done it ever again. Never done it before, but he got in my head, and you could see. Like I say, he was sort of saying that on cold nights in like November, this is what will pull pull the lads together, sort of thing. You've got each other's backs, and you're prepared to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of that sort of siege mentality, sort of, it's us against the world type sort of thing, which just, it sort of fitted into the demographic of the town as well, where it's, us against everybody. So I think that worked quite well. And he's probably underappreciated a little bit at Burnley, because those 3 years that he was here, or 2.5 years, what it was, that, he kept the club afloat, because they could have quite easily gone under. And then it's you talk about foundations of foundations. It was like a real sort of rock bed of what's gone on in the last 20, well, probably the last more 15 years. But I think, obviously I know intimately what he did and what he didn't do, but he sort of did that to people. He made it think, well, if I'm doing it and he's doing it, you're doing it as well. And you felt if you didn't do it for him, it's all, like you said, if you hadn't done it, you'd have felt left out. So it's a unique sort of talent, really.
He said
Chris Borden running through walls. Yeah.
But it's not only had an eye for player, I think he sort of helped negotiate with a lot of signings as well. I mean, he got Addy over the line, and he paid less than he should have done, and things like. He was always sort of wheeling and dealing in that respect.
Yeah, no. When Steve makes his mind up, he's pretty bullish. I think is probably the best word. Which is why sometimes he rubs the people up the wrong way. But because he is so intense. He does. He lives and breathes it. Like Wish just said, he's just been announced at Forest Green, which is only down the road from me, and he's definitely not doing it for money. He's made his money and the clubs that he's done it, but it's either in you or it's not, and it's in him. He wants to work. But yeah, those like you say, some of the players, people, even like people like Gary Cahill, he plucked him as an 18-year-old before anyone had seen anything. And you look at the career that he went on to have, and you can see that pretty quickly. But he seemed to see it before anyone else. Even myself, I don't think anyone saw me a 30 grand signing playing 400 games. So, yeah, and there was loads of them along the way. I think if you look at his ins and outs, I'd imagine he made more than what he spent, like I said, which helped keep the club afloat for that vital 3 years.
Talk about, you see, players that were versatile as well. You obviously, the size of the squad, you had to play different. You played right back a lot of the time, under Steve, and you played centre forward as well, didn't you, against Reading that time, if you remember?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I talked to someone the other day about that, actually, because I played twice up front in League One for Cheltenham and scored 2. But I played up front. But that Reading team wasn't bad. I think they got about 107 points that year, didn't they? So yeah, I think me and Kyle Lafferty up front weren't going to damage them at any point. I think we got beat 3-0. But yeah, Branchy was probably the epitome of playing everywhere. And like you said, we had probably had a squad of 15 or 16, really. There was a few kids along the way that sort of made up the numbers, but in terms of actual minutes and people playing, it was all hands to the pump and not many people, and training on a cabbage patch as well, which didn't help.
Then Owen Coyle comes in. I mean, whenever we've spoken to anyone about Coyle and his management style and so on, the first thing people say is he made everyone feel, 10 foot tall, and he was a great motivator and so on. But it's never quite that simple, it doesn't seem to me, from my experience of talking to people, that when a new manager comes in, everyone's excited about it. When you've had an established manager like that, how was that transition? Were people really excited, and did they buy straight into what Owen was trying to do, or was there an adjustment time there?
I think, I was slightly different because I was injured. So I'd done my knee in the August. I think Owen Coyle came in the November, was it, or something like that? So I was out for the best part of a year. So he'd say all the right things to me, knowing that I wouldn't be playing for 8 or 9 months anyway. So I think that might have been a factor why I didn't actually play that much under. I played quite a lot under him, but not as often as what I would have liked, because I wasn't really there when he first came in, if that makes sense. But he came in and he was a breath of fresh air. And it was, you look back now, and I think we had a brilliant dressing room. I think he walked into, so again, you talk about what Steve did. He built a brilliant dressing room. And the dressing room ran itself, and the structure and the framework of the team sort of ran itself. So Coyle comes in and he's a bundle of energy, and he's like, right, we're doing it. And obviously he was at an age where he could join in, and we do crossing and finish, and he's involved in every part of it. He's passing, he's crossing, and he's finishing at one point. And it's sort of like just go and enjoy yourselves. The one that jumps out is well, there's probably two things. Is the Chelsea game that we won in the League Cup. So we went down to London, and I remember putting all the Chelsea players up on the screen. And we have strengths and weaknesses, and it was like Chelsea weaknesses. And I'm sure it was pre-planned looking back on it now. But I can't remember who the analyst was at the time. But he went, take that down. He went, they haven't got any weaknesses. He went, so what? Let's just go and have a go. Let's have a go, eh? And we end up going and win on penalties. And it's sort of like we've just gone to Stamford Bridge, and he's like, I don't care what they are. Let's just have a go at them. And again, he made you feel. And it wasn't until he left that we all realised that we're not actually that good. But it's not. But it wasn't until he left, because we used to go into games thinking, oh, we'll win this. And that's what the second point I was going to make was the playoffs. We knew we were getting promoted that year. There was absolutely zero doubt. And I'd be surprised if you could find anyone in that group that was, well, we've got to get through Reading because they're not bad. And then Sheffield United, there wasn't any of it. It was like, right, well, we've got in the playoffs, we're going up. And that wasn't an arrogance. That was just the sort of the camaraderie that he'd built, and there was just zero negative doubts in terms of this is what we are. Right, you five attack, you five stay at the back. We've got the best. He always said we've got the best dribblers in the league. So it was the back four and Grezza, and you five just do what you want. We've got the best dribblers in the league. Go and enjoy yourselves. And
how early did you know, Duffo? How early did you know? Was that just when you got in the playoffs, or earlier in the? A lot of people.
No, I think it was. I can't remember now. My memory's terrible. I think was it Bristol City we beat on the last day of the season to get in the playoffs. 4-0 at home. Yeah. Because I was lucky. I was at the team at the time because we had Reece Williams. But obviously, luckily for me, his loan ended for some reason they didn't do it during the extended for the playoffs, which I was quite pleased about. But no, there was just a feeling of. I remember we went to Portugal. Made a big night out. And I remember Grezza went mad. Grezza and Wade went mad because Grezza had been beaten in the playoffs about 84 times at that point, I think. And he went mental. Like, what are you doing? We've got our biggest games of our lives coming up. And I'm like, no, we're going to go out and enjoy ourselves. We're all right. Don't worry about us. And he told you now, he said he was over because he'd been damaged so many times by getting beaten. We were like, we're all right, mate. This is what we do because we were really close. It was a bit 20 odd years ago, so we used to go out and have a drink together quite a lot. But not so much. It wasn't quite the Arsenal Tuesday night club, but it was like, no, we're all right. And it was almost on that trip. It's like, no, we're going to be fine here. Yeah. Don't change what we do. We didn't start training any harder or any less or doing more work on this or more. We just did what we did: crossing, finishing, five-a-sides. Energy, camaraderie, and obviously went on to have quite a good day at Wembley.
I say that carries you so far. I mean, you sort of a decent first half season as well at the top level until obviously Bolton come a calling and he couldn't turn it down. But it was that. I genuinely believe that we'd have stayed up that year if Holland had stayed. Yeah.
And that's no slant on Brian Laws at all. It was a unique group. We did things that don't work at football clubs. We were eating donuts on Fridays. Yeah. We were drinking cans of Iron Brew on a Friday. It was all team spirits. You talk about structure and patterns of play and detail in set play. We didn't do any of that. It was almost like a crazy gang type mentality. I'm not saying we did the extreme things, but it was that sort of feel amongst the place. And obviously Brian came, and I always remember, and I actually felt a bit. You look back now and you feel a bit sorry for him. I remember on the top pitch, and it was, if it's not it's not broken, lads. I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel. And we did a training session, and someone crossed the ball, and all three midfielders and all three centre forwards were in the box. He's like, "Whoa, I don't want that," and it's like, you just said you're not going to change it. But that's the way Owen was. He was gung ho. But I'm on the other side of the fence now. I'd be like, well, I don't want six people in the box and the left back crossing it because where's everyone else? We've got three men for the rest of the half. But it was a really difficult group to come into because, well, it's always hard to go in when we didn't want him to leave. We didn't want Owen to leave, and the irony is, you fast forward 10, 12 years, and Bolton are in League Two and Burnley are in the Premier League or in the Europa Cup, whatever it is. obviously he had a pull to that. He did what was right for him. But yeah, it sort of took the legs away from us, and I don't think Brian really had a chance, to be honest.
Did it need like another effervescent character, really, that just to keep that spirit high?
Well, I think it's hard to say now. I think anyone that come in after Owen would have found it difficult, just because it was such a unique group in terms of the dressing room, our daily habits, which weren't great, but they were good in a weird sort of way. I think anyone coming in, because we were going well, we would have questioned anything, because we liked the way it was. And footballers don't like change, and it might have been for Eddie struggled at the start. Eddie Howe, you look where he is now. He came into an old dressing room again, and it's like, what do you mean? There's cans of Iron Brew on a Friday. I'm not having that. And we're like, no, that's what we do. And now he was doing it all right, but that we didn't like the change, and that's why Eddie was so ruthless. He got rid of everybody over 30, apart from me somehow. I don't know how I survived, to be honest, but because he was quite a young manager at the time, so he had to be. So no, I need to just clear the decks here, and that's what he did, because it was such a unique dressing room.
It's an acquired taste, that Iron Brew, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not for me, but I definitely got a taste for. I definitely got a taste for Krispy Kremes. I know that. Krispy
Kremes. I remember speaking to Owen at the hotel in Cumbernauld, and I was just sort of. I used to do a sit down with a manager before the season, and I'd gone to the bar. And said, can I get you a drink? Or famously, he didn't drink alcohol. He just get me an Iron Brew, and I didn't know if it was just taking the mickey at me. It's like this stereotypical. It's like you seriously? Yeah. I was like, okay, fair enough. End up having Iron Brew ice cream on that trip. Well,
that was the brilliant thing with Coyle. He didn't drink, but he loved the lads going out and socialising together. He would come out with you, and he'd be drinking Coke most of the night or Iron Brew, and but he just loved watching the lads interact with each other. You could see he got like real enjoyment out of the lads spending time together.
Just going back to that.
Well, go on, Sam.
Just going back to that bit with Brian Lords coming in, because at the time it was quite difficult for fans as well, because like my generation, we saw Brian Lords as a player, and he was quite a popular player at Burnley, and he was a good right back, wasn't he? And I felt sorry for him a bit at the time, but he did feel a bit like a sort of, when Brian Clough went into Leeds after Don Revie and they made the film about that, was there a degree of the players not accepting him, or was it just that it was never going to be the same without Coyle there and that group?
I think probably a little bit of both, because I think ultimately you've got to remember we were a mid-table Premier League team at the time when Owen went. So I think the players, I don't like, obviously, Lords. I still speak to Lordsy now. It's he was one of the first people that rang me when I've just been sacked at Swansea. But I think he'd just been sacked at Sheffield Wednesday, who are near the bottom of the Championship.
Yeah.
So then to walk. So I think, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I think everybody thought they could have got a bigger name, whether that's right or whether it's wrong. So I think that was the sort of underwhelming feeling, probably from the supporters and the players, that if it isn't going to be Owen, if they'd have brought in a name, whether that's right or whether it's wrong, then you might go, okay, then I get that now. We are a mid-table Premier League team. But it was almost felt like, well, we're appointing a Championship manager. And I don't know whether that's a subliminal. That wasn't a conscious. We were having those conversations in the dressing room, going, "Well, he's only ever managing the Championship." But I think the whole feeling around the club, and like I said, he walked into unique set circumstances in terms of the group that he walked into. But yeah, I think we would have stayed up with Coyley. I think it was. I'm on that side of it now, so I get it, and I think it was a really, really tough gig for him.